You're listening to the Around the Lens podcast, the home of high-quality, roundtable, visual journalism discussion about the news, topics, and gear related to our career field. Now, here's the host of our show, David J. Murphy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 250 of Around the Lens, the last episode of Around the Lens. Yes, that's right. This is the last episode of AtL. After 5 years and 250 episodes, I decided to end the show. I'll go into my reasoning for that decision and where I see the future of the AtL platform in a moment. But first, let me introduce our panel this week. Now, I did plan for a few other co-hosts to show up. Maybe they'll appear here later in the show. So I'm going to read what I would have read, what I would have said if they were here, just because I think it deserves to be noted because of their contributions to the show over the course of time that, they've been with us. So, of course, the first person I would have introduced would have been, Zach Roberts. Okay, so he's been with the show since the beginning, very first episode of the show, and more than a co-host, I see him as a co-founder. And so, he was someone who, I couldn't have done the show with really without his support. So I just want to thank Zach for being, an invaluable resource to us. Of course, he's probably in Georgia or Wisconsin or Florida, who knows? He's traveling all over these United States trying to cover the election process and the whole new world we're living in. So good luck to Zach out there. If you do jump on later, we'll be happy to have you on the show. If not, it's been an honor and pleasure working with you, buddy. So wish you the best of luck out there. Next person, of course, I want to highlight, this is my second co-host. Joining us from the unusually noisy Hawaii is Mr. Ron Hamilton, an Eagle News broadcaster. Hello, Ron. How are you?
Sad, Dave. I'm really sad.
You're sad? Oh.
Yeah, Donald Trump was not reelected, and we had to shut down the show. So I'm sad.
Yeah, there's still a lot of court cases out there, and still a lot of votes that haven't been counted. So who knows? Who knows? It could go either way. There's just a lot of variability there. So we'll see. If he is reelected,
there's still hope.
If he is reelected, though, of course, we'll renew the show and get back on the air. You're right. It's absolutely contingent on him being a part of the presidency. But no, Ron has been a great asset to the show, and he was the first person who actually sought out an opportunity to be on the show versus me trying to find a guest. Like, I think it was Instagram, or one of the social media platforms. You actually pinged me and said, hey, I want to be on your show, or something like that. Or this is just an excuse to get your attention so I can be on your show. So after
I was making fun of you, actually.
You're making fun of me.
Congratulations, everyone. We have 1,000 Instagram followers. And I said, that's because you were following 5,000 people. The law of averages were in your favor. Anyway, I'm only following you because I want to be on the show.
Yeah.
And you said, oh, okay, sure. Come on, buddy.
There you go. That's all
you
have to do.
Here we are today. Yeah. That's how it works.
Well, that was sort of a technique, if you're not social media savvy, to help grow your follower base. You follow a bunch of people. I've since stopped doing that, but it was a technique I tried at the beginning. Actually, yeah. So I've unfollowed pretty much everyone who doesn't have an association with this show. So unless you're a guest or someone I want to be on as a guest, you're not an Instagram someone I follow on Instagram. Sorry, random spam bot accounts from Russia. I won't follow you now. Anyways, after his first appearance, you were able to fill in a couple times on short notice as a guest or co-host. So, when somebody dropped out at the last minute, you were there. And because of that and your willingness to help me out, I think you made an optimal co-host. So, you've been an intrinsic support to the show, and especially from behind the scenes. A lot of people don't know that Ron is constantly feeding me ideas for show topics. In fact, for a time, I let him pick all the show topics. So, what we were talking about was partially built on Ron's suggestions. So thanks for those, Ron. Also, I think Ron's wry sense of humor and sometimes cringe-worthy jokes and comments have given the show a sense of comic relief and a countervailing opinion from which we could argue against. I can always count on you, Ron, to be the devil's advocate. So let's get out.
I'm just the devil, not the advocate.
Oh, okay, right. Now I would have introduced Travis Keys at this point. Is there anybody else? No, he didn't drop it. Okay. So Travis, is a freelance photographer based out of New York and also chairman of APA New York. He also does his own show called Open Talk. So, after this one, you can go check that out. He does that weekly and he's still doing it from what I know. So support his show. Travis, has been a driving force in helping to raise the overall technical quality of the show. I'll be honest, I sometimes lack or slack on aspects of the show that I've decided not to prioritize, such as video quality, social media presence, or some of the graphic elements. But when Travis came on, he was quick to point out ways to improve and areas that needed more attention. If you've watched the series over time, even if you've just popped in from time to see if there have been any upgrades to the show, know that those upgrades were partially his support and result. He really pushed me to kind of increase the technical quality of the show. So I thank you for that, Travis, if you're listening, or if you're able to jump in and, of course, address that. I've always strove for a high audio quality, as this show started out as an audio-only podcast, and its core is primarily focused on audio. But Travis made me realize that if I was going to have a video component to the show, there needed to be a greater emphasis on the way we presented that show visually. And I need to stop yawning on camera. That's one of my biggest crutches there is, again, doing the show at night after a full day's work and taking care of 2 kids isn't easy, which is why I'm doing the show in the morning where I'm awake and I'm bright and I'm ready to go. Beyond that, Travis has been one of the most consistent co-hosts I've had in the past few years and has been instrumental in ensuring I've had someone to converse with during my time away from the States in my new time zone. As some of you may know, I live in Korea, so doing this show from here to back in the States can sometimes be difficult, especially with time zone differences and whatnot. So glad to have had Travis be there for us. Of course, I say all that and he's not even here. So what does that mean to me? Anyways, finally, joining us from Washington, D.C., and the newest voice of Around the Lens, freelance photojournalist Evelyn Hockstein. Hey, Evelyn.
Hey, everybody.
How's everything going in your world?
Everything, wow, it's good. Yeah, it's been a great relief. Everything is good. It's been fun in DC, a lot of celebrations. So
yeah.
Things are good. But I am sad that this is our last episode, Dave.
It is indeed a sad time, but also bittersweet because, I think there's going to be some new opportunities and we'll talk about those in the future or we'll talk about those later in the show in terms of what the future holds. But, the sad for this show, but not the end of the Around the Lens platform and content with all of us doing cool stuff. But has things sort of, obviously we've got the celebrations and whatnot, but is there a sort of quietness now or is it just the quiet before the storm, so to speak?
It could be the quiet before the storm for sure. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen. Obviously, the president has not conceded and he fired Esper and apparently he's like in a rage playing golf. So, who knows? This isn't over, but I think people in a blue place like Washington, D.C. feel a tremendous sense of relief. There was a lot of anxiety building up to the election. It took days and days. Everybody was like hanging around outside the White House, like waiting for the announcement. And then finally it happened on Saturday and it was just thousands of people flooded the streets. And, in many major metropolitan cities, we saw that. I don't know what the mood is like in non-blue states. I'm probably going to go do a story like that tomorrow or the next day. I can report back somewhere on some way. I won't be able to report back next week, but on this format. But here things are very calm, quiet, happy, and everybody's just watching, I think, and cautiously very optimistic.
Great. Well, Evelyn joined us at the start of the 4th season, and she helped bring a level of diversity we were honestly lacking. How many times do we joke about the fact that the show featured mostly 3 to 5 white guys talking about the industry, right?
It's definitely the bro show. So I was happy to break it up a little bit. Yeah. Indeed.
So, Evelyn brought a unique perspective to our discussion on new topics and, of course, news and, of course, gear. And which, by the way, Evelyn, before we let you go here, I need to know, obviously we've made a major decision. You did it?
I bought it.
Okay, hold on to that. Don't reveal it yet.
Okay.
But again, obviously beyond just obviously bringing perspectives that relate, because of her gender, you also have a vast level of experience in the photojournalism industry. You're an award-winning photojournalist in your own right. You've worked in more than 70 countries, covering a wide swath of significant events and topics. You being a woman and being able to break up the boys club was just a bonus on top of her remarkable experience and contributions to the field. We've been lucky to have you be a part of the program, and I'm so forward to looking to what other things you can do for the platform in the future. So, again, your contributions don't end here and now. I think people are going to be hearing a lot from Evelyn Hockstein with Around the Lens in the future. At least I'm hopefully. So again, glad to have you part of the show.
Thanks for including me. It's been
Absolutely.
great. Yeah. We're going to keep doing it. We'll keep it up. Yeah.
Indeed. So again, obviously our country made an important decision this past week, but I think the bigger and more important decision is what camera system you decided to adopt within the mirrorless world. Obviously, if Travis were here, and we could talk Sony and Canon all day and have our little arguments, but again, which is it going to be?
I bought the R5. Yeah. I'm a Canon user, and it just felt like the easier transition, frankly.
Right.
It's just, I could just jump into it. I hope one day, Canon, if you're listening, that you offer a professional discount like other other people in this industry. It was hard. I think I could have gotten a better deal if I'd gone maybe the Sony route, but for me, the R5 seemed to make sense. So I'll be shooting, I guess, with one R5 and one of my 5D Mark IVs. So I only bought the 2470 is what I bought, and the body for now.
So the 2470 RF lens
broke. I'm like broke now. So yeah,
no, absolutely.
Travis and I are very disappointed in you.
I loved this. I mean, honestly, Jamie, I've been like going back and forth. I loved the Sony. The Sony was awesome. I love the A9. I mean, I really did. I just felt like it just seemed like initially this would be easier. I could buy less. Well, I mean, I could have used my lenses with the Sony too, but it just was natural. I picked up the R5 and I didn't have to. It was easy, but I know it was tough. I hope I made the right decision. I do.
You're like -2 in the cool points, and you haven't bottomed out. It's just you've gone down a little in my estimate.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I really struggled. I mean, this has been a months-long decision, and not even. I mean, I think I would have been happy, honestly, with both, but in the end of the day, it just felt like I could just put this in my hand and go.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the, you've got a bounty of riches, right? You've got the best of both worlds you can choose from. We've never been in an era that has had so much great availability to us of technology and camera gear. So you couldn't have gone wrong either way. And ultimately it has to, go down to what you're comfortable with using. Right. And so if Canon's your comfort level, then go with Canon. So good for you. Yeah. Now, is your intent, do you have the converter for your older lenses? Are you going to use that for now? Or are you going to?
Yes, I have one. Yeah, I do. I didn't buy one because I'd use the I had to buy one to use the R, I think, for an assignment where I did silent. So I have one already. So yes, I'll use that. But I kind of just thought I'll use the 2470 on that body and just keep my 7200 on the other. But the adapter works great. I didn't have like a big problem. Didn't take anything away when I used it.
Cool. Yeah. Great. All right. Well, that's awesome. Congratulations on that. And look forward to hearing about, at some point, in some manner, how your experience is with it going forward. If nothing else, we'll look out for your imagery.
All right.
All right. Well, let's get into our guest this week. Joining us from the great state of Idaho, freelance photojournalist and podcaster extraordinaire. And it wouldn't be an anniversary episode without him, Mr. Mike Sharky James. Hey, Mike.
How's it going? Well, since Zach and Travis aren't here, Baba Booey to you all.
Indeed. Of course, we've always been looking out for that Baba Booey almost consistently. You're on every single episode. You're like doing the Baba Booey, so it's nice to see that. It's comforting. Everything going good for you in Idaho?
Everything's going great. Of course, they're losing their minds here in Idaho because we're a super red state.
Yeah.
But the Boise area is pretty well mixed. So it's about 40% or so, Biden camp, and the rest is all Trump. So it's not too bad. It's a college town.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Have there been a lot of sad faces as you've gone about and drove around, went from one place to another, or has it been?
People look like they lost their puppy here.
Oh,
But that's okay. They're going to find their puppy will be in prison soon.
All right. Well, thanks for coming back, Sharky. Maybe we can get that one last Sharky bump from your appearance. We'll see.
We'll see.
Joining us from Redmond, Oregon, an international photojournalist and Memento workshop instructor. And honestly, I think the heart of this show, Miss Jamie Rose. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
Hi. Well, I'm really glad to be here. I think I was on like one of the very first episodes, so I was thankful to be invited back, and and it's nice to see all of you guys.
Yeah, you as well. Everything going good there in Oregon?
Yeah, we're just starting our cold snap into winter, which for Oregon is like, a great thing. People move here because of our gorgeous fall and winter sports and
the weed.
Sure. Yeah. And we have mushrooms now too. So come on over if y'all want to get high.
There you go. All right. That's a ringing endorsement right there. Jamie, I know you, obviously the Memento workshops is pretty contingent on people getting together. How has COVID affected your business, and have you seen it kind of come back sort of as things have changed or gotten better?
We definitely have pivoted quite a bit to online content. So starting this week, we'll have signups for the winter mentoring programs that we're going to be offering. So there'll be 1 month sprints where people can come in and just do like really intense punctuated business and career development mentoring programs, because I think, our logic was that everybody's going to need to kind of shift their business, whether you're in the teaching industry as we are, or, the client relationships that everyone's having right now has to change. And so a lot of the focus of the mentoring programs are going to be on like, what can we get done in a month to really bring some of that business revenue back up and get people ready to go. So it's been new and interesting. We definitely, teaching in this environment it's a bit strange. It's hard. I mean, as like Evelyn knows, or anyone who's been on a Memento workshop with me, like I don't sit still very well. So like sitting still in front of a computer is difficult, let alone like having to teach an entire thing. But
right.
But it's been pretty great. We're really excited about the new opportunities that are coming up. And then in 2021, we're going to start hybrid workshops. So it'll be the first time that we've ever done the ability for people to come and participate virtually. So if you don't want to go to New Orleans in person, by April of next year, although I don't think that's going to be an issue based on this morning's news. So
right.
So we're pretty excited about that. But I think a lot of people are really ready to travel. And the nice thing is that we have our 2020 lineup, 21 lineup all ready to go. So we're ready. We're ready to travel as soon as, it's safe. And we have a lot of new protocols put in place. That's for sure for in person.
That's right. Just like in our show, we're all 6 feet apart, at least.
Yeah. Continents.
Indeed. We were trendsetters in that regard. So, again, from the very first show, it's always been, socially distanced. I should actually institute a mask policy. If you all could just put on your masks for this, I would appreciate it. Just to be extra safe. There you go. All right. Well, Jamie has always had a way to bring us together and make this show feel like a family. So in a sense, I feel this is like a family reunion. So anyways, welcome back, Jamie. All right. Finally, the globe-trotting photojournalist who will happily take you to all the best spots in Cuba and was most recently published a book highlighting the heroics of our frontline nurses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Bruce Byers. Hello, Bruce.
Hey, how you doing? And just 2 minutes before you came on, my computer crashed. So
that's par for the course.
Grab out the other one, but I can remember joining you way back when in the beginning, and it was a really nice show to be associated with. And thanks for letting me come back on. And it's great to sign you off here on this one. And We're just here in New York, and lots of people coming. There's no more ghosts in New York. They all disappeared. They're all people now.
Oh, that's good. You got the ghosts out of there.
Yeah,
Clean them out.
yeah.
Got the Ghostbusters.
Well, they got the Disney characters back in Times Square, so I figured something's happening.
Well, if the Disney characters are back, then things have returned to normal. That's the key litmus for normalcy in New York City is the off-brand characters, who will gladly shiv you if you don't pay them for their photograph.
Yeah.
Anyways, always great to have you, Bruce. All right, well, let's get on with the show. We got a lot to talk about today. So what I like to do on these anniversary episodes is start with a little state of the show. And I want to go into kind of my reasoning for ending it. So I've got a couple bullet points here. And, if you guys, we can talk about these a little bit. But first and foremost, was the time investment. Besides obviously doing the show, this hour here that we get together and talk, which is fun. I've always enjoyed it. It's the best part of the show. But it's the smallest part in terms of the time investment required. So obviously there's a lot of things that have to go on before and after the show. And then there's almost a near constant thinking about the show. So when I'm not on the show or doing it or editing, I'm thinking about ways to, put on content or, stories to talk about and whatnot. So it's almost like a part-time job. It requires probably about 10 to 20 hours a week of my time. And when, I'm a full-time father of 2 kids, I've got 2 to 3 hours a night of free time if I'm lucky, if I'm not too tired. So it's just kind of like all that free time is just kind of gone into, not only creating the show, but also the additional content such as the reviews, news, interviews, and whatnot. So, it's just, again, it's a lot of time to put into a show. And ultimately, I would be fine putting the time into it, but there was just a lack of growth. So that was the other issue is that, over time, I've seen the audience and the views and all the different, I could go over the numbers, but I'm not going to bore you with those. But essentially what I've seen is a stagnation and a decline over time. And when you're doing a show like this, if there isn't increased growth over time, or you're not getting to a point where, like with Sharky's show, he could get to a point where he could selling, audiences, ads and whatnot. If you're not getting to that point, it's kind of like, okay, what is this worth for the audience and the people doing it? If people aren't engaging with the content or aren't listening to it, or there isn't a, growth there, then it's difficult to justify the amount of time expended to kind of put into the show. So, what I'm trying to do here with, going forward, and we'll talk about the future is, trying to find content people actually want to watch. And ultimately, the only number that was going up consistently with our shows was the episode count. So again, I had to make a decision there in terms of what did I want to do, what I want to gain from doing a show like this. And, I'm not saying that potentially this show won't come back in the future. Who knows? Maybe I'll just take a year hiatus and get itching and want to come back and do this again. But this show specifically, but as of right now, I need to find another outlet for, what kind of content I want to create. And so if this show isn't it, even though we're all having fun, I don't think I've ever had it. Maybe once or twice I've had a guest who didn't have a great time. But for the most part, I think we've all had fun doing this show. But again, if the audience isn't there, even though the folks, again, if you've listened to or watched the show consistently over the years, I know there's a few of you. Thank you so much for that time and energy and effort, especially those who've been giving on our Patreon. I'm extremely thankful for you and what you've done to help progress and support the show. But again, there has to be a point where I say like, okay, either this isn't, going to go anywhere or, we got to try something else. The other issue I had doing the show, and this is mostly my fault, is the technical issues, for the most part, not a week went by. We didn't have something go wrong. And, when you do a live show like we did, that's kind of going to come par with the course. It's tough to manage when things are live and, you're just going to have mistakes come into it. And also technology and all the other things, the internet. So going forward, any content we produce won't be live for that reason. Now, at the core of the show, I want to ensure you that, one of the core things I've focused on with regard to technical capabilities is audio quality. So even when you watch the show, even though we're mostly talking heads, audio quality has to be priority. Now, the other issue or other thing I thought about with regard to why in the show, or what's the reason perhaps why the show isn't growing, was the basic premise, right? So, my basic premise with regard to starting the show was that anyone can talk about anything. If you're a visual journalist in this career field, it shouldn't matter, as long as it's generally related, we should be able to talk about it. And I felt that, identity or show identity was probably something I struggled with regard to trying to get it consistent, right? So some weeks it was like a news discussion show. Some weeks it's like a panel discussion show. Some weeks it's like an interview show. And so I think some people appreciate that variety, but I think there are others perhaps who are looking for something more consistent, or perhaps can get a little bit more utility out of the show. Like, for instance, Sharky, what I love about your show is the fact that it's a great, highly focused, condensed 30 minutes or so of news content. I can get in and get out. I get the news I need and go about my day. And so that's why I think your show was and still is successful, and people were drawn to it. So what I'm going for, and we'll talk about, the future of the show, is consistency and utility. So consistency in technical quality, and utility in something being that, is useful to the end user, the listener. All right. So future of the show. So let's talk about what I plan to do with the show going forward. So I'm going to break things up a little bit. I've got a couple shows that I'm working on right now with some of the other co-hosts. Right now, working on a news specific show. This will be me and one other co-host talking about, the news. So, again, trying to create what happened in the week's news and kind of condense that down to a nice tight or so 30 minutes of edited content that provides the listener with some utility about the world and news of visual journalism and photography and filmmaking and all that good stuff. Basically, I want you to be fully informed about things that are going on in the world. And I'm primarily and initially going to be working with Travis on this concept, and hopefully we'll have a pilot out in December with weekly episodes starting in the new year. But there will all be an opportunity for rotating co-hosts. So, perhaps Travis can't make it and Evelyn, you'll be on, or Ron, you can be on, or maybe I can't make it and it'll be Travis and someone else like Zach or something like that. So that's kind of my vision for that show. And it's going to be a condensed summary of the week's news with some commentary by the people who are on talking about it. And next, the other show I'm working on right now with Evelyn actually is a panel discussion show with a diversity focus. So as we've mentioned before, again, it's pretty easy to get a group of 4 guys, white guys, together to talk about the world of visual journalism. That's not hard, but I think there's a diversity of voices out there in the world of photojournalism. And so I'm going to be working with Evelyn to help get those voices to be heard on a monthly, at least, basis with a focused topic panel. So again, we'll see how that goes. Looking forward to it. Hopefully you'll see something here in December or in the new year. So again, excited to try that out. And then another working with another show with JM. It's going to be like a photo book discussion show. We're still kind of working out the details, but again, I'm excited about that. And finally, we've always had interviews on the show, or we've always done interviews as part of Around the Lens, but they've been few and far between. So I'm looking forward to making interviews a more regular part of the platform as we focus on at least one interview a month. Again, all these new shows are a way to shift the focus of Around the Lens from just a podcast about visual journalism into more of a platform for all aspects of photojournalism, photography, videography, and filmmaking. If you have an idea for a program you think would work well for the platform, let me know, and I will help you produce it, and we can make it a reality. So that goes to any of you or anybody listening or any co-host who's been on the show. Happy to work with you and see what we can do to help expand the platform. All right. Any thoughts about anything I said, panel, before we move on to the week's news?
Well, sounds good. Looking forward to the new shows.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I say on the one hand, like, oh, I'm devoting so much time and energy to this show. And then on the other hand, I'm saying, oh, here's 4 or 5 new shows I'm working on. Like, Dave, aren't you being a little bit hypocritical there? And the thing of it is, it's like, there's, like, Sharky, you and I have talked about this, right? It's like when you're working on a new show, I think there's an excitement level there. And that's what I'm getting at with regard to the new shows. There's excitement that is kind of promoting me to kind of, pushing me to work on them and devote the time and energy. It's like, so, that's kind of like my take on it.
I don't think you're throwing your brand away.
You got to keep it fun.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think you're throwing your brand away. I think you're just expanding on it. So it's okay to do a show for a year and then change it up and keep going.
Yeah.
Why not? Things change every other minute. So why
Right.
not shows?
Right. I mean, it's all about finding an audience, and finding, right thing that audiences want to engage in. So, if that doesn't work, if all these different separate projects are complete failures, I can always go back to this. I think this is, at the very minimum, I enjoy doing this. And I enjoy bringing you all together to talk about stuff. So yeah, I'm excited for what the future could bring. All right. Well, anyways, let's talk a little bit about some stuff that came out. And of course, I love talking about gear on here. So I want to talk a little about Canon. Since we have a new Canon user, a new Canon R5 user, I should say, I'm sure she'll have some thoughts about this. But Canon just recently announced their new Nifty 50. It's a 50 millimeter f1.8 $200 lens. And of course, this isn't, your super duper pro type lens. Of course, if you want to spend $2,700 or something like that, you can get their 50 millimeter f1.2, I think. Yeah, this is $200. So, and from what I've seen of the reviews, the quality is right up there in terms of it being a high quality lens. They've also released a 7400R f4 RF lens. So if you're interested in getting into that zoom range and you don't want to spend I think $2,600 for the f2.8 lens, you can now get one for about $1,600. So you're going to save $1,000 and you lose one stop of light there. But let's talk about these lenses. We'll throw it over to you first, Evelyn, since you've got the new R5. Any consideration for either of these two lenses or any other lenses in the RF series? Or what's your next lens, so to speak, if neither of these are in your sights?
I mean, I think the next RF lens I'll buy is a 7200. But I was definitely
the f2.8
really
variant, right?
Yeah. But I was very intrigued by the 50 because the price point is excellent. Everything's super expensive. I'm not really a 50 millimeter shooter. It's not my lens. A ton of photographers I know shoot with a 50 prime. They love it. And for me, 1.8 seemed great. So I guess it's like in the old Canon lineup, there was always that like cheap plastic 50 that was like a 1.8 or something. And then there was like the really big, expensive heavy metal one. So this is intriguing to me. If it's fast, if it's sharp, it looks tiny, which is nice. Like if you want to just carry your R5 around and actually like benefit from the lightness of it rather than, having that big 2470 on it and like go on vacation and just lighten your load. It could be good. So I'm intrigued. But I don't think it's out yet, and I don't know anybody who's tried it. So I want to kind of wait and hear what people say.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can pre-order it, but the only people I've seen who have it are the influencers on social media.
Yeah. So, but I love it. I mean, it's great. Everything's so expensive with that camera. So
yeah.
If it's
have you noticed Canon with Canon's lenses, they're going smaller. Like their 70 to 200 seems the 2.8 is tiny.
No,
and a lot of
it's not.
It compared to what the regular one is. It's tiny compared to they've gotten smaller with their lenses, and this 70 to 200 f4 it looks more like a 24 to 70.
F4, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking the 2.8.
Yeah, the f4. But the 2.8 is a lot smaller than the regular 2.8.
A little smaller.
It seems like
isn't it? It seems like it's a lot smaller, right? Isn't that the lens I'm thinking of, Dave?
Yeah, but like if you zoom it out, I didn't love it. I mean, the design.
That's the thing.
It like zooms out, and then it's just as big as the other one.
Right.
But then
that's true.
More compact. Yeah.
Yeah. These are
really
like extending tube lenses.
Yeah, that's what it's called. In that regard, I think like the Sony better.
Do you find that you need a 2.8 and a longer lens when you're shooting?
All the time.
For what? For the light or?
Light, yeah, definitely. Because I'm like a news photographer. I can't. I need a 2.8. Like if I'm in a press conference, I'm already inside, and I'm pushing it to. You have to have it. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how good that mirrorless is with the low light then.
It's very good with the low light, but I still think if you can shoot 2.8 is great for shooting a press conference. So I would basically shoot it at 2.8 anyway. So yeah, it gives you the speed, and if you don't have to bump up the ISO too much. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, if they sold a F2 variant of the 7200, I'm sure you'd get that, right?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, yes. I mean, I think if you're far back, you'll get enough depth of field, but sometimes it's like tricky, you know? So I don't know
Right.
if I'd want it. The 2 would be, yeah, I guess it would be good. Like the couple times I've shot in the White House and you're in that East room and there's literally no light in there, the f2 would be good. But yeah.
Well, is the 24 to 70 a 2 or 2.8 variant?
2.8. They make a 28-70 f2 and it's like humongous. I don't know anybody who uses that lens. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
I heard also it has a lot of focus breathing or focus, like it hunts for focus a little bit more than the 2.8 variant from what I've heard.
The 2.8 was super fast when I tried it. I loved it. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah.
You have it, don't you?
I have the 24 to 105 f4. So I might get the 7200 f4 at some point to complement that. You know, again, if I was like you, if I was doing the photojournalism thing full time every day, I'd have the trinity of 2.8 lenses, you know, in my camera bag at all times. Or, you know, I don't know if you plan to get a second R5 body at some point. I don't know if you're a 2-camera shooter like that, but you know, you'd have the 7200 and the 16-35, and that'd be your kind of go-to, right?
Yes, eventually, but I can't. The investment's too big right now, so I'll keep my like 5D Mark IV and the 1 R5 for now. That's my plan.
Yeah. How about you guys, other panelists? What were your thoughts on these 2 lenses? Any intrigue any of you? And if not, what are your thoughts on sort of, you know, lenses in general in terms of what are your favorite lenses?
Well, I'm a Canon shooter, and I like the 24 to 70 and the 70 to 200, but I've never wanted to carry all that weight of the 2.8 with the travel. You know, that second mile is every mile gets a little bit heavier and heavier. I shoot fairly close anyway, so I've used my shorter lenses a lot more than my longer lenses. But the 70 to 200 is a tack sharp, beautiful, very fast lens. Very fast. I know Travis isn't here, but I put my Sony down to pick up my Canon because I just can't focus with that Sony like I can with the Canon. So
that's interesting.
Even in the bright sun, I was shooting a protest, and I'm walking through the crowds, and I got my Canon out. I had my Canon in my bag, and I was shooting with the Sony because I was shooting some video too. And I go, this thing ain't. And I grabbed my Canon, and it was like there was no problem. It was amazing, the difference.
Which Sony body was it?
I shoot with the 1DX and the Mark III, but I just
the Sony. Well, what was the Sony?
The 7R3.
Oh, see, that should have
R3. Okay.
Yeah, the focus on that should be pretty darn good.
Yeah, but I always I can
was that,
do
Jamie?
So much better with the Canon.
I think the thing about Sony is that it takes everybody a little bit of getting used to is that it doesn't have, especially if you're coming from a Canon or a rangefinder side of things, like it's the first time in a while that I've actually read the manual to figure certain things out, because there's so much functionality, especially with like the zone focusing that the Sonys have. Like it's so tack sharp sometimes in where it's trying to pinpoint, you know, the subject that you want to frame, that, you know, I almost wish it had a little bit more loosey-goosey zone screen, because I could just be like, I just want this whole area of the frame to be in focus instead of like this really fine point part of it. But I've truly loved the switch this year. It's been incredible. The color is bananas. I think that's the other thing that I've really enjoyed about the lenses, because the 35-1.4 Sony lens, the prime, is just gorgeous. Like it's so sharp, and it's just got gorgeous bokeh when you want it to, and you know, when you need that like deep depth of field, it can just really bring out the background so well. And I haven't found, I think probably because back in my photojournalism days I was so used to carrying like 4,000 pounds of gear that everything was so heavy. I think that even the heavier lenses, like we have the 70, the 35 zoom and the 35 prime, and then we have the 24-70, and neither one of them feels heavy. Not like the Canon, the 70-200 Canon 2.8 was always a bear to carry around. And then, all of the other ones combined, it just gave this huge weight. And I think probably because the cameras are so light, I didn't even notice them. And we went on like a long hiking trip for Labor Day weekend, and just having the lighter gear, I mean, it was incredible. Back, for any of you guys who do a lot of outdoor photography, I mean, back when I would have like the Mark II or the Mark III, 4, whatever, with that 24-70, and then like a 70-200 with another Mark II over there, you'd be hiking up a mountain, and if they were swinging, I mean, it literally could like topple you over with a backpack on and everything else. And this way it was just like, poop, just gonna throw this thing on my shoulder and hike up to the top of this ridge. And if I needed it, I could just grab it really quickly. I've been really impressed with it, in the sense that it's kind of like a little bit like a BMW, in the sense like, sure, you can get in it and you can drive it, it's fine, but there's all this other like extra functionality that makes it so cool. So I don't know, I'm a big fan, but I don't know anything about the new Canons. Sorry, guys.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued by them. And like I said, they'll probably end up in my kit at some point in the future. Definitely the 50 millimeter. I think that's probably going to be a impulse purchase probably when that comes out. But I'll wait on the 70-200. But yeah, I love the 70-200 on my old Canon 5D Mark II. Beautiful lens, is indispensable. And the equivalent that I used for the Panasonic was wonderful. The f2.8 for the 35-100 for our Micro Four Thirds users. But,
switching to Fuji using the 50-140, I do not enjoy it as much as I did the Canon 70-200.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sharky.
Listen, I'm a shill, right? No, full disclosure, Fujifilm sponsors my show, so yeah, one of my sponsors. But I love the gear; it's great. But I get what you're saying. I mean, things are coming along. Things are getting better. Firmware improves things, as Fuji is really known for. I mean, they just added the functionality to the X-T3 via firmware update to get the focusing you've got on the X-T4, and it's wonderful.
That's great.
Update.
And full disclosure, Sony sponsors as our official camera sponsor for Momenta, so I will throw that out there. But I think the thing that's really nice about this is back, 20 years ago when I first started as a photojournalist, there was Canon and there was Nikon, and then there were amateur cameras. And now it's so nice to see, the emergence of the Sony mirrorless system and the Fuji system. And there's a lot of variety out there that is making it so that it's not just this monopoly of these two camera companies. And if you want to turn your lens clockwise or counterclockwise when you put it back on, because those are really your only two options. And now we have all of this great functionality and versatility. I mean, one of the reasons why we changed our official camera sponsor this year was because the Sony system was offering so much variety of what you can get with a single camera. I mean, you have this gorgeous video camera. I currently have it as a web camera. There's just so much more that we're getting out of the camera systems these days that it's really coming down to like, what's your comfort level? And, if Bruce doesn't like the Sonys, that's awesome that there's a Canon available to him. And I think the reason why, I appreciate of the Sony system is that they've got those great adapters. So if you really loved your Canon or your Nikon or your Leica lenses, you can just buy that adapter and use it with their system if you still want to use their system. So I think that's probably the future.
And look what Sony did. You had your like task specific bodies, right? You've got the A7R was the high resolution one. The A9 was kind of your sports photojournalism one. The A7 was your kind of, get into the system, kind of do everything body. And now they've all kind of converged a lot. I mean, just look at the A7S line, for instance. So great in low light, but then you've got all the other bodies are great in low light too. So they've all kind of, you can, if you wanted to, you could shoot sports with the A7R Mark, whatever is out these days, but it wouldn't be your go-to, but you could do it. And then, so now you kind of pick the body if you had to pick one that goes with what you shoot mostly, and you've got the other available options too. Whereas when the first versions came out, you know, it was kind of, you weren't, I tried shooting sports with the original A7S just to see if I could. And that was just that was a non-starter. That 6,000, you know, I shot sports all day long with that. And I shot the Utah high school football championships, 2 games with the A6000. I had my D4S with me, my Nikon, and I didn't even take it out of the bag. If you know how to shoot and you've got the availability. But man, you press the button on that A6000, it was like all 11 frames were full. You know, you didn't have the control like you do now, but all 11 frames were going down range.
Yeah. Let me throw it out to the entire panel here. What would be the one lens you couldn't live without? If you had to choose one lens for the rest of your life, what would it be? We'll start with you, Ron. No, Ron's muted. Probably is Ron
That would
back?
have to be the 24-70. It's a good versatile lens, probably 2.8 version. And, you know, especially for photojournalism work, you're getting up close. And my ideal lens.
Okay. Bruce.
Well, on my Leica M6, it would be the 35mm 2.8. And on my Canon, it would be the 24-70.
Okay. No. All right. I got okay. Perfect. Okay. Jamie. One lens for the rest of your life.
A 34 1.4 like a 34 prime, or sorry, 35 prime.
Like 34.
A 34. That's a special one. That's just made for me.
Yeah.
No, I think the 35 prime is probably, if they had to take everything else away, that like 1.2, 1.4 range is.
Okay. Sharky.
You know, it's going to depend on what you shoot, right? So back in the day, I would have said a 70-200 2.8 because I was shooting a lot of sports, and I liked shooting a little standoffish to kind of get that, you know, so the subject wasn't aware that I was there, kind of thing. But I'd have to agree with Ron. I'd say a 24-70 2.8 these days equivalent, because I mean, I think just being right there in the scene, and you know, as for environmental portraits and that sort of thing, and just getting more, that's what you want.
Okay. Evelyn?
Agree. I mean, yeah, if that's what I had to live the rest of my life, that would give me the most versatility for sure. Yeah.
24-70.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty happy with the 24-105. I wish there was a lower aperture variant. Like if there was a 24-105 f2.8, I mean, obviously that would be the dream lens in my opinion, but I would lean, yeah, it would be huge. Or a 28-200 f2.8, wouldn't that be the wonderful lens right there, the perfect lens? Actually, if we're gonna go completely fantasy, I want a 16-300 f2. Okay, can I get that, please, Canon manufacturers?
And a Sherpa to go along with it.
That's right. It'll need
strong back.
It'll need its own tripod, mobile tripod, you know. But I would probably, you know, as a versatility guy, I would lean towards the 24-105, or, you know, even a 28-200, you know, one of those cheapo f4 to 7.8, whatever, 7.1 lenses, just because I want the versatility more than anything, just because that's where, you know, again, if you're talking about needs, you know, I would rather have the versatility. If I'm going to have one lens for the rest of my life, I'll accept a little downgrade in quality for the versatility of lens focal lengths. But
well, it'd be interesting if you could, you probably could sort your pictures over a month according to the lens, the focal length you used, and see which one comes out the most that you've used. Like with I shoot film with my M6, and I can't put anything on there except my 35mm. It just doesn't work for me, because that's the way I see. And it'd be interesting to see with the Canon, with the zoom, if it's 35mm is the most I shoot with. And then could you then just use a prime of that number and be comfortable with it, you know, because, you know, and then you might find that you don't need to carry all these lenses because you hardly ever use it. You know,
and you can find that out in Lightroom, of course. Lightroom shows you.
Nice. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. And we may have heard about this, a little known thing going on. I don't know if it's been that well advertised, but there was an election in the United States, and so there have been reports.
So you're speaking of the NPPA board election.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, that little known election. No, of course, the presidential election occurred, or is still ongoing. Of course, per all the major news media outlets, Biden has been selected as the president-elect, but of course, there's still votes to be counted. So we'll see how it all turns out in the end. Regardless, the election happened, and some of us had various levels of involvement in the coverage of that. I think I'll probably start with you first, Evelyn, since I know you've been on the ground, sort of covering it from obviously DC and whatnot for a long time. Let's talk a little bit about the election itself and kind of how things, not the election itself, but covering the election and kind of how it's been from your perspective, and then we'll go around the group.
I mean, I went and did some like pre-election stories in Arizona and Florida and sort of got the pulse in those places. That was a lot of time just, talking to both sides. Obviously, Trump won Florida. We did see a Trump rally in Florida. And that sort of, was expected. I think the thing in DC, voting all goes fairly smoothly here. I mean, we are just a small place. It's like 99% blue. I mean, it's just pretty uneventful polling, I guess. So I was here in the city on election day. And I went to the White House that night, but obviously no results came out and people were waiting, gathering, but it was a small crowd and just, maybe a couple hundred people. And then Wednesday night and then Thursday night and then Friday night, I did not go when I realized that Pennsylvania wasn't going to announce. And then Saturday it was the announcement. So I think it might be different. Maybe somebody who covered the election in a Pennsylvania, in Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia might have gotten a different vibe, but here, my coverage was fairly, as expected. But I did see the different feelings and emotions and likes and dislikes for, pro-Trump, pro-Biden in Arizona, obviously, and Florida. And when I was in Arizona, the story we were doing were Republicans who were voting for Biden. So obviously that worked there. I mean, they got Mark Kelly elected. So that was interesting to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know Travis or Zach was jetting around different places, traveling, trying to capture some of the different environments. When you were at the White House, you said there were about 100 or so people there. Was it a mix of Biden and Trump supporters, or was it mostly Biden?
It was like there were one or two Trump supporters that were like mixing in the crowd. And a couple people were being provocative and then the crowd sort of pushed them out. I do think somebody got arrested that first night, but I missed it. So I don't really know what happened. So yeah, I saw like one lady with a MAGA hat and one African-American dude with a MAGA hat, and the crowd was not pleased with them, but nothing ultimately happened. I mean, they just sort of left the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you covering Washington, D.C. area politics during the transition from Obama to Trump?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I was here, but not really. No, I wouldn't say I was like focused. I will say, sorry, there were some Proud Boys here on Tuesday night. But they were at a hotel downtown and people saw them, but they didn't really mix in the crowd. Okay. Just to say that they were here.
No, if had you been here at the time, I was just, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sharky.
No, it's Bruce.
Bruce.
Just a quick question. When you got, let's say 10 different places that you're going to go to. And obviously in Florida, you said you had the assignment was to deal with the Trump voters to Biden. How often do you go to places where you go, I just can't find anything different? What do you do in that situation? I mean, because there's Trump flags and Biden's flags and everything else in every single one of these places.
I know. It's true.
Is it tough? I mean, did you find it very tough to pull the unique story out of that area?
Yes. Well, yes and no. I mean, I think what was interesting, for example, in Arizona was doing the story about the Republicans for Biden. So these were like real Republican stronghold people who had always voted Republican and just felt like they couldn't do it for the state of the nation and rule of law. And they were very conservative people. And for me, that was a real shift and there was a movement. So that was a different story. And I think, you know, I just, the luck of journalism, like one day we found these two people on the side of a road and you have this beautiful Arizona mountainous background in the desert. And it was in a town where a lot of motorcycle people are going and biker bars. So this older couple who were Republicans sat every day on the side of the road holding these Biden signs. And they're like, this is what we're doing. And they were actually Republican elected. They'd run for office, like state office before. So they were well established Republicans, and this is what they were doing. So you do find these gems, and they were like really interesting people, and of course that made for a great visual. And you got some, you know, you got them, and then you get people giving them the finger, or you get people honking or supporting them. Florida is just visual. I mean, we went to a gun store. We did go to the Trump rally, which was great in the villages, and I know people have seen the golf cart parades and things before, but it's still fun. You can make good photos and there's just a lot of craziness, but it does get repetitive. So it's not like my stuff was so unique or original. But, you know, we pieced it all together in Florida. So I think we had a lot of diversity. Like one hand, we had the villages, then we had people, black, white, Hispanic, like everybody was buying guns for different reasons. And that was really fascinating to see that because everybody had their fears. And at the same time, we saw like a community march for restoring voting rights to formerly convicted felons in Florida. And that was a mostly minority get out the vote campaign. So I think all the contrasts we got to see made for a different storytelling. But to your point, yeah, I think everybody's a little bit ready for. Everybody was tired of hearing, seeing this. It was the same
old,
thing
same old,
for a long time. And there was like 10 you know, when Trump was doing 5-6 rallies a day at the end, I mean, you know, it does sort of run together. You just, but I hadn't really been to a Trump rally like that. I've been, but not right before the election. So it was exciting nonetheless for me to go and do it. So. And I also went and did a border wall story. So, you know, you find the different angles, you know, it's not just straight news. It's more like features and interviews and get good portraits of people, things like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Anyone else cover any election related stuff? Ron, any Eagle News down there in Hawaii? You covered any election stuff down there for Eagle News?
You know, regarding Hawaii is a very, very blue state, but the Trump enthusiasm here was really outrageous. So much support, so many caravans, and from the native Hawaiian community, just it's all over the place. It was really, really nuts here. I kind of thought he might actually win the state. It was kind of a surprise.
That's a good
point,
based on
Rob. Enthusiasm, yeah.
Because the Trump enthusiasm is a lot higher than the Biden enthusiasm. The most Biden enthusiasm I saw was like at the celebrations at the White House. I was like, where'd all these flags come from? Where'd all these signs come from? Like, you're like hunting, you'd see occasional yard sign, Biden, Harris, but like you're in a Trump country, it is everywhere. Like your barn is painted, your car is waving a flag, you know, it's just t-shirts everywhere. I mean, there's a whole lifestyle and apparel thing in Trump stores that you can really deck yourself out on, and that just doesn't exist in the Biden side. So that's the enthusiasm definitely can, yes, influence your opinion there for sure.
Indeed.
Excuse me.
Looks like we lost one of our members. Oh, Sharky, what happened to Sharky? Oh, right. Hopefully he'll be back. Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, the election, you know, beyond going forward, you know, what are your thoughts about, you know, the next 70 days and into the new administration? Do you have any thoughts about how things will change or moving forward?
I think
Evelyn?
they're going to start clapping in New York again, and it's going to spike the hospitals, and we're going to have war again in New York, unfortunately, because I know the nurses that I've been photographing, and they're reporting, you know, they're getting to the edge of are we going to have to start picking our patients? And, you hear the ambulances going a little bit more. So it'll be interesting if New York doesn't behave itself, we could have I might have to pick up my project again,
yeah.
which turned out to be a great project, but it's not a great project when it is, in signs of health.
Well, I just read about a vaccine that was supposed to be 90% effective, and actually I noted it because the Zoom stock dropped, so I have to examine my portfolio. But from a documentation perspective of DC and politics in general, Evelyn, are you tracking anything, or do you think you'll see any difference in terms of how you cover that, or what you'll cover?
Mute here. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not that person. I don't really cover the Hill or the White House that much. I'm much more outside and covering people. And so I may be covering politics and things surrounding them. And I do, it's not that I never cover the Hill. I do occasionally. So I can't really say my job is that I don't know what role I'm going to be playing. But I think, until January, it's going to be status quo or less access. I mean, it's hard to know with the president. Is he going to check out? Is he not going to give any press conferences? I don't know. But I think things may really slow down in the White House for photojournalists going to cover events, things like that. But that's just a guess. Yeah. And the transition team, I mean, I guess that's going to be happening, and that might keep the Biden transition stuff busy, but I'm not.
And you'll probably be covering the inauguration, I presume, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know where, but I'll be somewhere. I'm usually on the parade route somewhere.
Definitely.
Yeah. Actually, I think the first time I got on this show was because of the shot I think I took at the inauguration. It was like a Time Picture of the Year. I think that's what maybe call me the first time to come on.
Could very well be
there and looking out of the limousine. Yeah,
definitely. All right, well, maybe we'll have inauguration special. Who knows? Maybe we'll do these as a special thing every once in a while. I don't know. We'll see. It'll depend on how much I miss it. But anyways, all right. Any other thoughts on the election before we move forward?
No, I'm ready to stop talking about the election. It's just been so stressful. Yeah. I'm happy it's over.
I definitely hope that, as we move into whatever this next stage is, I'm sitting on the outside now for the first time of a campaign, and the full inaugural cycle of being on the outside from a photojournalist looking in. And I sincerely hope that we start to see a little bit more issue-based reporting. I've never been so frustrated at a time in America when we should be talking about small business owners and healthcare workers, like what Bruce was saying. And, everyone's focused on what the latest tweet was in the last 6 months. And, we should definitely be pointing our fingers at the president or his administration for the deaths that are happening. But we weren't talking about the ways that businesses should be reopening safely, the ways that we could start, doing different things differently. We stopped talking about the issues, and I've never seen a race that focused on the horses so much, and not the actual, that they were just focusing on the race and just the horses in the race and not the issues. And I really hope that in the next few months, honestly, my first thought was, fantastic, you guys have called a winner, great. Can we please have Congress start on Monday talking about the stimulus package again? Can we start talking about how, there's millions of Americans that still haven't been able to get the original stimulus check to help get them through? We're not talking about unemployment, exceptions. We're not talking about not just eviction relief, but landlord tax relief. There's so many issues that are so pressing right now that I could genuinely give a crap what the president was tweeting about yesterday. Unless it's Americans are going to get more of a stimulus, or we are actually going to start talking more about the vaccine research, or talking about what's actually happening at the hospitals, like what Bruce is documenting. I mean, these are things that are so incredibly important for journalists to be able to stand up and say. I really don't care what the map guy the chart throb that I just learned is a word this week. The guy on CNN and like where he bought his khakis was trending on Twitter on Saturday. I was like, I am disappointed in you, America. We should not be talking about that. Who cares where that guy got his khakis? He still has a job.
Yeah,
that's where
you're so right, Jamie. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, in terms of how journalists should approach this next stage, it would be incredible if they would, if we could see a focus on the editorial perspective of the realities of the situation that I don't care who is coming into office in the next year is going to be facing. That bully for them, they all have a job. Now they need to help everybody else who doesn't. That would be my wish for the coverage moving forward.
Well, we've been living in this sort of unprecedented time where the president sucks the air out of every other subject or distracts from it or deflects from it by some outrageous statement that the media has spent and so much time covering. And maybe that's the question that we need to ask now. Like, let's rethink this. We focused on every tweet, every outrageous thing, but maybe, instead of focusing on, let's use like Melania, for example, the first lady's jacket that she wore when she went to visit a detention center about children separated from their parents, like let's focus more on that issue and not the outrageous thing that's distracting us. And maybe that's a call for all journalists to say, hey, we need to get back. We are going into we haven't even felt the beginning of the economic effects of the coronavirus. And even if the vaccine is on its way, people are suffering financially. Yeah. So, there's a lot of work for us to do, and let's move on now.
One thing that I wonder about is what happens. So you covered the Biden administration, but there's probably so much stuff that's going to come out about what happened during the Trump administration that we don't even know about yet. And covering that disaster as it unfolds, how does that all get covered?
Yeah, good point. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be... There could be this. This president could go to jail, perhaps. Who knows?
But at the same time, what? And this is why I'll tell you guys. Like, I had a funny conversation with my sister, who's incredibly political, and she made some comment a couple of weeks ago about like, well, what do you think is going to happen with this, and what do you think about this? And I was like, sure, I genuinely don't care. And she's like, how could you say that? And I was like, I don't care because I live in a state where we're watching, beloved restaurants and small businesses and like tourist locations. And I mean, at the time we were having wildfires, 1 million acres of wildfires were burning. And it was the bottom of the page after you scrolled until Twitter says you've reached the end of coverage. Like, I kind of don't care, let the lawyers, like, if you want to have it be on the court beat, sure. If anyone's going to sue a politician in the next year, fine. Put it on the pages that go into local news or national news, but put it behind the fact that Americans are suffering right now. And we have to talk about this. We have to talk about the fact that the poverty limit, like the poverty growth rate has increased for the first time in, I think, above 53% for the first time in decades. Like we are going to have systemic generational poor in this country like we haven't seen. And, I love it when people are like, well, we went through a recession, 10 years, 12 years ago. Like, no, this is not the same. This is not going to be the same. And we are ignoring that to talk about essentially the Kardashians. And did you see what she wore yesterday? Did you see what he said? I wonder what he meant by this. I wonder what she meant by that. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, there are so many more important things to be focusing on right now. And the fact that, I in terms of all politicians, what I'd love? Instead of wondering if like one individual is going to go to jail, I wonder how any one of those people who are in office can live with themselves, knowing the fact that they sat on partisan lines and refused 4 weeks before the election to pass a stimulus bill that would help the rest of the country as we all went to the polls. And there wasn't rioting in the streets because of that. Like, that should have been the thing that, was at the top of their list. But instead, everyone's like, I can't believe that the president put 14 tweets in all caps in 1 hour. Like, he does that all the time.
Well, just think New York City shut down 700 miles of subway track at 1 o'clock in the morning till 5 in order to remove the homeless out of the subway system.
Wow.
If they hadn't have done that, the homeless would have literally taken over the subway.
Wow.
I know they did it because they had to clean the subway every night. No, they're at trains full of homeless people because there was no any place to go, no other place, and nobody was talking about it. Our wonderful mayor, nobody was talking about it, and our city is just bleeding like you wouldn't believe. I mean, just bleeding. You know, they're losing $10 million a day just on the subway, and nobody's talking about that. How are you going to bring that subway back? So yes, there's an awful lot of stories to be told.
Yeah.
And they got to get some newspapers back so we can put our stories on the paper or someplace.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a great way to end it, and go to our next topic, which is, of course, what are the Kardashians wearing? Have you seen the latest outfit? No, of course.
Did you know that one of them was 40 years old?
What? Oh my God! News at 11. Let's go and talk about that for 15 to 20 minutes. No, our final topic for this week's show, and our final topic, in total, is a look at the future. Of course, over the past 20 years or so, our industry has changed dramatically. Whether you're in photojournalism or video, making, or if you're a portrait photographer, wedding photographer, whatever you do with a camera and a lens, over the past 20 years, things have really changed as we've moved from film to digital to, dial-up internet to broadband internet to phones with no camera to phones with 5G and 6 cameras. Things have really changed over the last 20 years. So I want to throw it out to you, and let's go around the lens one last time and talk about where we think the industry will be in 20 years from now. So why don't we start with you, Jamie?
Oh, that's such a hard question. How many years?
You need more time?
20 years.
20 years. 20 years from now. Again, think about, where are you going to be 20 years from now? Where's the industry going to be 20 years from now? What kind of insights, future project?
Well, my sister would be incredibly disappointed if I didn't say that we should all be able to have that built-in camera in your eye.
Oh, of course.
By then, because she laments that constantly, as I'm sure all documentarians do. But well, how about I say what I hope is going to happen? Because
sure.
I'm not a very good prognosticator. I'm sure
right.
That's my business partner. He's much better at predicting those kind of things.
Definitely.
I think we're probably going to see a lot more nonprofit-based news outlets, similar to an NPR model, just because for fair or foul, I think that, our commercialized, very stagnant, only owned by 3 different, monolithic organization news sources are starting to get disrupted by independent news organizations. That if we can move into a more diverse nonprofit news network, I think that would be really interesting. I think we're seeing some of those things starting with things like Report for America, which is, a nonprofit supported journalism program that puts nonprofit funded journalists into newsrooms around the country. I'd really love to see a backlash and a growth of local news organizations again. We almost lost our paper this year, our local Bend Bulletin, which is just a wonderful publication. They're actually a really incredible local news source, and thankfully they were saved. But I was surprised that a nonprofit or publicly supported model wasn't introduced. So I'd love it if that was something that was embraced a little bit more. I mean, I hope that in 20 years from now we see a lot more diversity in the field. Not just, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, but, seeing more voices from locations that are being covered by people in that location. I think it's it's happening a lot with the coronavirus, and it would be nice if that actually stayed that way. If we were able to see, African reporters covering African issues, and Latin American photographers covering Latin America and being supported by an international news outlet, that would be a really great thing to see in the future.
All right. How about you, Sharky? Where do you see ourselves in 20 years?
I think in 20 years, what you're going to see is artificial intelligence, also known as AI, will put the pieces together based on the data it sees and find stories that might otherwise go unreported. You know what I'm saying? It'll find the corruption faster. It's just going to put all that together, find the stories, and who knows, maybe even assign it out to whatever robots out there shooting in 20 years.
Just send a drone out to go shoot an event.
Just go send a drone. I mean, I'm serious. Like in 20 years from now, what's going to happen, right? AI is going to be huge, and AI will find the stories that you're just not going to usually find. A human probably won't find. Okay. And so I think that's going to change journalism. And then visual journalism is going to have to, meet the challenges of getting to those things sooner and finding the shots and whatever other kind of challenges legally there are in 20 years. Who knows what's gonna change rights wise and such. It might be a whole different world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. We've seen AI be a huge factor in phone photography and whatnot in terms of night mode and all these other features. So yeah, absolutely. Definitely see that expanding. I mean, we're already seeing AI writing stories, so it wouldn't surprise me if more creative stories and whatnot are generated by AI. How about you, Ron? 20 years from now, where do you see yourself, and where do you see this industry?
Well, let's talk about gear for a second. Since Sharky got the AI portion of it, let's talk about gear. We won't have cameras anymore. Everything will be a cell phone.
Okay.
I hate you, Ron.
I think. I'm just saying. I think it's a combination. I think the AI is going to write the stories. Like we said, they do that already, and then on the ground field reporters are going to be carrying around cell phones.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening today. Why wouldn't it happen 20 years from now, right? Or be more prevalent? I don't think you'll ever get rid of the tried and true camera with interchangeable lenses, but we'll see. We'll see where cell phones come in 20 years. They're already folding. So who knows? Interchangeable cell phone lenses. That's the future right there. How about you, Bruce? Any thoughts on 20 years from now?
Well, one hope is that I live another 20 years so I can continue to shoot my black and white film, because I think the artists will come back a little bit stronger. Hopefully the economy will allow that. That fine art will come in, that photography kind of take where painting is and be an art form. But I do think that things are going to be covered worldwide from drones and stuff like that, news-wise. But I think people will go back and search for those old processes to, just because seeing it on the phone to me is not hanging on the wall. It's not, that type of thing. So hopefully the fine art world will stick around with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Evelyn, where do you see the world in 20 years, visual and image journalism world? And you're muted.
Okay, I think even more than now, everything will be recorded. Everyone will be shooting. For all we know, we blink our eyes and we are taking a picture, or it's the camera. So, I don't know what our role is going to be, but I think, like Bruce was saying, there's always going to be a role for, the artist, the person that's not just capturing something, but doing it in a compelling visual way. So I think there'll be a space for that, for storytellers in that medium. But the daily news and going out and shooting or covering even events like these celebrations, I think we're going to see a different landscape. Like, I don't know what the role of if there's going to be a role for a photojournalist.
Yeah, I mean, how do you compete with 1 million cameras all live streaming 16K footage of everything going on? at all given times. It's like people get the information, they get out, they move on to the next thing, and that's probably going to exacerbate, as internet speeds get faster and faster. And we're at 5G now. We'll be at what, 25G or something like that, 6G, 7G.
So the next celebration will be everybody holding their cameras up, videotaping the celebration.
You'll probably just take all the camera streams and turn it into a 3D room that you can just rotate around and choose whatever angle you want, Yeah. Well, I think in 20 years, we'll be celebrating the 25th anniversary of Around the Lens as a platform. And we'll be, all of you will be having your own shows, and you're making 6-figure salaries, creating content for my platform. No, I think, I think you're going to see, I agree, a propagation of cell phones, a propagation of just general media infrastructure everywhere all the time, inescapable. Much as we are now, you can't kind of not be out there on the internet. You can't not be prevalent. An image survives forever online. It's going to be just exacerbated that far into the future. I think cameras are only going to get better with cell phones. And you're going to see a continued marginalization of the dedicated, still photographer. But I think those who, kind of like just now, those who do survive will be that much more, like there'll be a much greater appreciation for that type of content. It's kind of, we've always kind of talked about, we've always been negative on the show about the future of photojournalism and whatnot. But for as negative as we can be about it, it's still good. It still goes on. It still persists. It's still something people continue to do. And so I think no matter what, no matter how good technology gets in our cell phones, no matter how smart the AI gets, I think you're going to still have dedicated people with brains who are going to, have to carry around a camera with lenses and capture content. And no matter how difficult it is, or perceptually difficult it is to make a living doing that, it's just there's a human desire to want to capture and put that lens in front of your face and whatnot. And so I don't think that'll ever go away, no matter what. There'll be people who do it, and it'll just get better and better over time. And we'll all be shooting with our 200 megapixel cameras that can shoot 32K video. So that'll be just the norm. But I'm hopeful for, all that being said, I'm hopeful for us as purveyors of this type of content in the industry. And, again, as long as I can pick up a camera, I will. And so I'm sure all of you will as well. But all right, well, I'm going to end it there on this last show of Around the Lens. I do want to shout out a few people. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to say on behalf of everybody who's participated with you, and, it is a labor of love to do this, and the fact that you brought on amazing people like Evelyn and Travis to diversify the group, and Ron and all these other people, that, it's always been a lot of fun. I especially love whenever, you would get like someone like Michelle McLaughlin and I have like a Christmas and wine episode or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was really wonderful of you to do this for the industry. And it's always great, no matter how many podcasts there are. And even if only 20 people listened in a week, maybe the next week more would, at least those 20 people got something out of it because of your blood, sweat, and tears. So thanks for doing this, even from all the way around the world after you got deployed to a different place. So,
indeed. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you for that, Jamie. I truly appreciate it. Yeah. And moving did not help the situation at all. Maybe my tone will change when I get back to the States and I can get on the same page as everybody else, or at least the same general time zone. But yeah, having to shift whatnot and work that in with work and everything else was not easy. But I do appreciate that, Jamie. And yeah, even when I did the show and there was nobody listening to it or watching it, just having you all together and getting us all together in a room was nice. And it was like a catharsis and a little bit of therapy, if you will, for us in our industry. And so again, I see there being a future for that in the Around the Lens platform, perhaps in the future. But for me personally, it's a blood, sweat, and tears commitment. And I've been doing it 5 years, pretty much nonstop straight. So I need to take a break from all that. So we'll see. Maybe in a year from now, perhaps there'll be another way to us for all to get together in a similar fashion. But I did want to highlight a few people who had nice comments to say. Timothy Floyd, he was, saying, it'll be quite a challenge to produce something like that. But you did a great job, and I look forward to the next endeavor. Thank you, Timothy. David Goldman said, good luck with your new endeavor. Thanks for having me on the podcast. David Sutherland, my professor from Syracuse University, said, wow, 250 episodes, pretty amazing. May your next endeavors have long lives as well. Let's see here. Oh, Hannah Kozak, whose book definitely you should all check out. You can see the link in the show notes. He Threw the Last Punch Too Hard. We've had her on the show a few times. She said, Dave, thank you for your passion for photography. I'd like to say after 250 episodes, it's time for a well-deserved break. Yes, I agree. You earned it. Thank you to Travis and everyone involved in Around the Lens. You certainly helped launch my book, He Threw the Last Punch, during the challenging news cycle. So thank you all for those kind comments. I truly appreciate it. So one last time, is there anyone, let's go around here, the lens, and Sharky, where can people find out more about you and your work?
You can check out the Petapixel Photography Podcast in whatever you listen to podcasts in. So.
Definitely. Bruce?
Bruce Byers Photography and brucebyers.com, and come check out the book and buy a book, which is part of the proceeds are going to go to a charity for COVID patients through the nurses. So brucebyers.com.
Thank you. Evelyn?
You can follow me on Instagram at Evelyn Pix, EVELYNPIX, and I hope to be back on the air sometime in the near future with Dave, so look out for that. And Bruce, I'm excited to see your book. Good luck with that. That's exciting.
Yeah, we already have 1,500 copies bought.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
You should go on the new podcast Dave's going to do about books, photo books.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right. Jamie?
Okay, you can find me at momentoworkshops.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. You can individually find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. And we're on Instagram, of course. So I look forward to seeing all of you virtually at Momento Workshops programs and then in person next year.
That's right.
And hopefully on other podcasts like this.
Indeed. We'll have to go get together for the Around the Lens convention next year, all in person. No, I'm just kidding.
And I'll give a shout out. I was just interviewed for the Imagely, which is a WordPress photographers platform. And I was just interviewed for their Pivot and Shift series, which if you haven't checked it out, it's a really great podcast on the ways that photographers are handling COVID and different ways that you can pivot and shift. And one of the most recent ones was with a lawyer who was telling people about what to think about with their contracts. And I highly recommend that episode. It's very enlightening.
Great. Absolutely.
What's it called again? Pivot and Shift?
Pivot and Shift. If you go to YouTube, it's on there. And the company that hosts it is Imagely. So Image-Ly.
Cool. Well, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. Ron, you got anything for us before we sign off?
eaglenews.ph for all my news content. And then Instagram will be Ron Photo Hawaii for some sunset pictures and stuff like that.
Great. All right. Well, again, while this is the last episode of this iteration of the show, you can always go to aroundthelens.com and find out what we're doing there, and stay tuned for all the great stuff that we're going to be pushing out soon and into the future. Beyond obviously the shows I talked about, I still plan to do some of the original content I was doing, some of the more scripted thoughts and conversations and things like that. There's going to be a lot of experimentation in the platform going on now and into the future as I free up the time that I'm not going to be spending doing this will be time spent experimenting and finding maybe different avenues and different shows that will hopefully, garner an audience that would be larger. But, in the end, this has been a wonderful experience. I've truly enjoyed doing it and networking with everyone and meeting so many wonderful people. We've had hundreds of guests on this show over the last 5 years, and you've all been such a great benefit to me in terms of just being able to meet. And I know many of you and many of people who have enjoyed the show have gotten great benefit out of hearing your thoughts, expressions, views, and ideas about all the things that relate to what we do. So let's continue that in other forms and factors into the future. And again, I think visual journalism is a truly wonderful and magnificent industry. I love being a part of it, and I will continue to be a part of it for as long as I can. So let's continue the conversation online again in other methods and means. And I look forward to, again, talking with all of you into the future. So that's it for me, David J. Murphy from Around the Lens. Like I said, go to aroundthelens.com. And for the last time, we are out.
Thanks for listening to Around the Lens. We hope you enjoyed the show. To continue the conversation, head on over to one of our social media outlets such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. To support the show financially, consider donating to us via Patreon. For show notes from this week's episode and links to everything else we talked about, just go to our website, aroundthelens.com. Finally, if you or someone you know might be a good guest for the show, get in touch with us via email at info@aroundthelens.com.